Hi all, happy today. I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today I'm bringing you my review of the life and suffering of Prince Jerian. I was able to get this video out one day before the game comes out on July 20th because I'm a Kickstarter backer, but I was going to make a review of it anyway even if I didn't have early access. This way I just got to play it early so I can give you my thoughts on it, which will hopefully help you decide whether this game is for you. I'll do my best to keep spoilers to a minimum and only use footage from the first hour or so of the game, but obviously there will still be some spoilers since it is a text-based game, so there's not much else I can show. If you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, then feel free to just listen to my review, since I won't go into specifics when talking about story. The Life and Suffering of Prince Jerian is the long-awaited follow-up to the cult hit RPG The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante by Schisma Games. When Sir Brante came out in 2021, it was a surprise that it got popular because until then most RPG fans, myself included, I'll be honest, kind of looked down on text-based RPGs because they didn't have enough gameplay. I'm sure nowadays there's still people who think that way, but a lot less than before because we've had a lot more text-heavy RPGs that have proven to be very good in recent years. Still, as we go into this, do keep in mind that Prince Jerian is a text-based RPG only. There's no character that you get to control, you don't move around in the world or equip items or fight monsters, nothing of the sort. However, this game does have a ton of choices with extremely meaningful consequences that change the fate of the people around you as well as the entire Arcanian Empire. It's very heavy on the role-playing aspect of RPGs, and the narrative and world building are thus its strongest points. We obviously first have to talk about the story and writing. I think the writing is top-notch as it was in the first game, or honestly even better. I feel like the personal narratives of all the characters, Prince Jerian included, feels far more engaging. I immediately got to care about multiple characters and wanted to try to get good outcomes for them in the story, which is always a good sign. And on the other hand, I also utterly hated certain characters, which is also a sign of good writing because not everyone can or should be good, or to everyone's liking. Some characters are supposed to rub you the wrong way, especially in order for the game's writers to get their points across about the main themes of the game. The story of Prince Jerian just feels so much bigger than Sir Brante. Obviously that makes sense since now you aren't just managing your character and the fate of a few groups like your family and your chosen faction, you actually have to figure out how to run an entire empire full of people, and that's hard. Just like Sir Brante, this is not an easy game, and the story is not an easy one to swallow either. It's a dark story about empire and oppression, power and control over the masses through law and religion, human rights to freedom and equality, and your character is at the center of it all, making choices that indirectly, or more often directly, affect the lives of many. If you can't stomach dark stories like this, the game may not be for you. But I personally think that there is a lot of value in difficult stories that show things as they are and force you to grapple with the many terrible truths of humanity. Plus, it's not all dark. There are good endings here, you just have to work for them. The story is divided into 5 chapters that follow the prince's life, focusing on important events in the Empire as well. Obscurity, the Heir, the Great Censor, the Creed, and finally the Millennial Senate. By far the most difficult chapter to successfully complete is Chapter 4, the Creed, because it's difficult to balance everything while keeping rebellion from happening. That's definitely how I got my first ending, but don't worry, you can learn from your mistakes and figure out how to maintain the character you're role-playing while tweaking a few choices here and there to be able to achieve your goals. There is still some element of the mathematical choices that I had an issue with in Sir Brante, meaning that you need certain stats to be at the right value in order to have specific choices available to you in the story. However, in Prince Jerian you have more freedom when making your choices because there are additional ways to bypass checks, plus I think more options in general. Both the consequences of your choices and the requirements for them also seem far more logical to me in this game compared to Brante, so it feels more natural when you replay a chapter or the entire game. It doesn't take away the immersion just because there are numbers to look at. The story is still at the forefront and you can still roleplay. To me, the ability to properly roleplay my character is crucial in RPGs, so I am very happy with the changes they made for Prince Jerian. Let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. As I said, this is a text-based RPG, but that doesn't mean it's simple. In fact, Prince Jerian is far more complicated than its predecessor because it has so many more elements that you have to manage. Which makes sense, obviously you are playing as the Empire's prince, the heir who is shaping the entire world with his choices, so yeah, that's not gonna be easy. You obviously have the state of the Empire to worry about and whether or not a rebellion is coming, then you have the power of your family and the power and loyalty level of all the major factions, And on a personal level, you have your character's stats and his relationships with individuals. Your character's personality stats are very interesting because they are 3 sliding scales of logic versus passion, will versus blood, and love versus law. You start with each at 5, and then when one increases, the other decreases. You will need these aspects of your personality for certain choices and quests, but I find more so that they are showing you the general direction that your choices for the Empire have taken. They are color-coded, so the red ones have to do with equality, progress, and justice, whereas the blue ones have to do with oppression of the common folk, religious dogma, and upholding traditions instead of allowing progress. Your character also has 3 skills he can work to increase throughout the game: management, diplomacy, and scholarship. You can increase your skills by specifically choosing to focus on studying, or by putting them into practice in various scenes. Like, for example, choosing to intervene and mediate a conflict between 2 characters will increase your diplomacy skill. When it comes to the Empire, in the politics section you have the most important bar ever, at least in my experience of playing the game, which shows you the public sentiment in the Empire. If you reach 10 on that rebellion scale, the whole Empire will revolt, and the game will end. I don't consider this a spoiler. It's pretty clear in the game that that's what's going to happen, and I'm highlighting this because it's the hardest thing to prevent. Anyway, you also have the current stance of the Empire in terms of progress versus tradition, equality versus elitism, and jurisprudence, aka proper justice, versus dogmatism. This is essentially showing you the direction that your choices are taking the Empire in. At certain thresholds, there will be special scenes that trigger, which will show you the consequences of leading your empire in that direction. The estates section shows the power of your own family and of all the other factions, as well as your standing with each of the factions, or how loyal they are to you. There are special scenes that happen at certain thresholds of loyalty, just like with the Empire's stance on the main political perspectives. The major factions are the great houses of Arcanians, the most traditional Arcanian nobility that considers itself above all others, especially humans, the distinguished Arcanians, the less traditional Arcanians who have more so worked for their status and achievements and who are more accepting of humans, the Old Faith, which follows a specific scripture that has everyone accepting their lot in life, the New Faith, which seeks to abolish the lots and let people have the freedom to make their own way in life, the human nobility that has risen through the ranks to prove themselves worthy, and the commoners that everyone is spitting on or using for their own gain. As you progress through the game, you will see the colors of these factions changing based on your choices. Gray means neutral, golden means ally, and black means enemy. It is important to have some allies to aid you against enemies in certain situations, but the rebellion meter is far scarier, in my opinion. Maybe it's just because of how I personally play through the game and you won't have trouble with it, but I doubt it. It feels like it's difficult to manage rebellion on purpose. Maintaining stability in an aging empire that has long been crumbling is supposed to be hard, almost impossible, so it makes sense. Anyway, these are the main stats that you care about. However, there are 2 more important resources that you can use to unlock some choices when you don't meet their requirements: sanity and the legacy of the Tempests. Sanity is a finite resource. You start with 5 points, and if you use them all, your Jerian will go insane and the game will end. Every time you use a point of sanity, you will also get a special scene with some kind of consequence and negative effect of doing so. I found these scenes super interesting, so much so that I actually used all of my sanity points on purpose to get to see what the insane ending would be like. I highly recommend it. It's very cool and, well, messed up, but that's the point. The Legacy of the Tempests, however, is more of a potentially renewable resource, more similar to the willpower of Sir Brante, but instead of being a personal source of willpower that you can use to force yourself through a tough time, it's about Prince Jerian's connection to his Arcanian ancestors of the Tempest family. You can get points towards this if you accept the guidance of your ancestors or make a choice that most of them approve of, but you can also lose points if you make a choice they disapprove of or actively antagonize them when they try to connect with you. It's a very interesting system because there are many different ancestors you get to connect with and see the experiences of, in a similar way to how the Avatar got to connect to previous avatars in The Last Airbender if you watched that show. So you'll find certain ancestors that your version of Jerian respects, whose choices he approves of, and thus who he will gladly connect with. However, there are also ancestors you, or Jerian, might find repulsive and which you want to distance yourself from. A very interesting spin on the willpower mechanic from Sir Brante, which I greatly appreciate because willpower in Sir Brante was one of the main reasons why all the different endings ended up being a spreadsheet of choose A, then D, then C, then A, etc., instead of being based on roleplay. Obviously, these legacy points are still useful to you to open up choices, but there's a lot more depth to your choices in regards to this resource due to these interactions with your character's ancestors. In many ways, Prince Jerian feels more like an empire management game than an RPG, at least if you look at all of these various parts of the empire you are forced to manage as Jerian, but I think that this added complexity makes for a better story and a better RPG. You have way more choices, way more potential consequences to deal with, way more people who are affected by your choices. Everything is just more grand, more impactful. Anyway, the story and mechanics are really the most important things to talk about, so I'll talk about the smaller things in this miscellaneous section. The visuals are beautiful. I loved the art style of the first game, and they kept it here and refined it even further. I love it so much that one of the first things I did, like 2 minutes into my playthrough, was take a screenshot of a particular piece of art that appeared during a scene because I thought it looked really cool. Another thing I appreciate is that they increased the size of the book. In the first game, it just took up half or 2/3 of your screen, but now it nicely fills the screen so you can more easily navigate the various menus, the art is bigger, and of course the text is easier to read too. The music is also in the same style as the first game, which I love both because it's iconic and I associate it with the game's setting, but also because it's just very good music. The cutscenes are beautifully animated with this iconic art style in a very cinematic and dynamic way, and they are narrated by the same voice actor who narrated the cutscenes in Brante. Again, this was one of those things that I liked because I associate his voice with the setting. I think he did a far better job in Prince Jerian as the narrator. In the first game, I thought his narration sounded a bit stiff, but now he was great. The performance was great overall. In this early access build, I only had one issue once, where in my second playthrough when I was testing some choices in a chapter, I probably pressed to skip through the scene too fast, and the next scene didn't load, so I had to close and reopen the game. But otherwise, in my first regular playthrough, where I wasn't spamming any buttons, I had no technical problems. It's a very polished game. Clearly, the devs wanted to take their time to add all this polish in. This was actually the main reason they did the Kickstarter, and I appreciate their attention to detail and the dedication to make this game as good as they can before releasing it. In conclusion, The Life and Suffering of Prince Jerian is an amazing RPG, even better than its predecessor, but due to various design choices, being a text-based game, focusing on dark and difficult themes in its narrative, and having a complex set of elements to manage, I think it will stay pretty much just as niche as The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante. As long as the game is successful enough for the devs to keep making more games in this setting, or any other they want, I'm happy. I don't think every game should be for everyone, because we all have different tastes, and I just love to see indie devs putting out weird but interesting games, things that you would never ever see from a AAA or even AA studio. You can feel the passion that goes into these niche experimental games, and you just know that the devs made the game because it's what they wanted to play. With how safe and boring most big games are these days, I am ecstatic when I find a small indie game that does enough cool things for me to enjoy it. So I will always showcase what I consider to be the best indie games on my channel to try to get more people to know about them. I hope you enjoyed my review of The Life and Suffering of Prince Jerian. Hopefully you found this useful in helping you decide whether or not you want to try it out. At the time of recording this, on Saturday, July 18th, there's still a demo up on the game's Steam page. I don't know if it'll still be there once the game launches, but obviously if there's a demo, you can always try that first before committing to buying the game. I'll leave a link to the Steam page in the description. Until next time, I'll say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much. Your support keeps my tiny channel going, so I can keep making videos like these talking about the games I think are worth sharing. If you want to support me, subscribing and becoming a member are the best ways, but of course only if you want to and can afford it. Even just watching the video already helps a lot. Optionally, give it a like if you enjoyed it, or leave a kind comment. This has been B Tier Mutineer. I wish you a happy rest of your day or evening. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.